አደባባይ ሚዲያ ለወገንተኝነት ጀርባውን የሰጠ ጊዜያዊ ጥቅምን አምቢኝ ብሎ የዘመመን ሊያቀና እውነትና እውቀትን አስከትሎ ኢኮኖሚያዊና መንፈሳዊ መረጃዎችን እንካችሁ ይላል። ትኩስ ዜናዎች፣ ዘጋቢ ፊልሞች፣ ጥልቅ ትንታኔዎች በአደባባይ ሚዲያ ይቀርባሉ። ራእያችን ጊዜውን ያማከለና ዘመኑን የዋጀ በእውነት የነጠሩ መረጃዎችን በእውቀት ደግፎ ለሀገራችን ብሎም ለዓለም ሕዝብ ማዳረስ ነው። አድሬሳችን አደባባይ ኢንፎ ሚዲያ @gmail.com፣ ዌብሳይታችን www.adebabai.com። ያግኙን፣ ይርዱን። የሁላችንም ስለሆነች ኢትዮጵያ በአደባባይ እንዘግባለን። አደባባይ ሚዲያ።
Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us. This is Adebabay Media's Viewer Digest program. My name is Ethiopia, and I'll be your host for today. In our conversation today, we're going to be talking about TPLF and what is beyond that. Since the war started with TPLF, it has been 5 months. Since then, we have seen thousands flooding Ethiopia, millions starving, and few thousand this war has left to die. So why did we go to war, and why was that necessary? Especially at a time where the country is already struggling through COVID, inflation that has affected every single citizen, and the killings of innocents, especially the mass killings of innocents that is happening within the border of Ethiopia. This is a conversation that we're here to have today with our guest, Eyerusalem Kebert. I'd like to invite everyone to like this conversation and share it, and to stay with us.
Adebabay Media yeni now. Adebabay Media yeni now.
Adebabay Media yeni now.
Adebabay Media የሁላችንም ነው።
የኛ ቤተሰብ አደባባይ ሚዲያን ይመለከታል። የእናንተስ?
Do your parents watch Adebabay Media?
Watch, follow, subscribe and help አደባባይ። አደባባይ ሚዲያ ለወገንተኝነት ጀርባውን የሰጠ።
Welcome back, everyone. If you're just joining us, our guest for today is Eyerusalem Kebert. I apologize if I messed up her name in the beginning. We're going to be talking about what is beyond TPLF. On the 4th of November of 2020, a TPLF-led army has attacked the northern command of the Ethiopian army, which forced the federal government into a war. A few days after that attack, more than 800 Amharic-speaking people were massacred by a TPLF-led army in the town of Maikandra. And even though the war has been declared, it has been won, 3 weeks after the war has started, the fights are still continuing, and we're still seeing the gruesome side of the war, really. So why was this necessary? And especially when we're understanding why the war was started and who started it. And looking at this, though, however, many of the Western medias and Western organizations are focusing more on the aftermath of the war and considering TPLF the victim of this situation right now. And they are now considering, shifting the blame into the Ethiopian federal government, and they're demanding all kinds of things. And especially now, those of us that are active in the social media, we've seen how powerful social media is, how powerful the campaign is and misinformation is. And also we've seen so many people using the victims as a way to grab power and stay in power. So this is the conversation we're here to talk, and what looks like, what is the future of Ethiopia, especially looking at it from this perspective. Our guest is Eyerusalem Kebert, like I have introduced, and for those of you, I know most of us saw her as she was speaking out against, this misinformation is really defining and letting the world know who TPLF is and what kind of leaderships they have run in the last 30 years in the country and how that looked like. And really differentiating between, yes, there are victims in Tigray, this war should not have happened, but also that doesn't mean that we're saying TPLF should come back to power as well. And thank you so much for being here with us and for accepting this invitation for the conversation that we're about to have.
Awesome. Thank you so much for inviting me and having me here.
Absolutely. I know I did a quick introduction of who you are, but could you give me a bit introduction for our users that may not know you, so we could pick up from there?
Awesome. Like you all heard, my name is Eyerusalem Kebert. Was born and raised in Ethiopia. I moved here when I was in high school. Lived here for the last couple of years. Finished my MBA in health system management, and currently I work for a health system organization. That's a little about me.
Thank you. So who is TPLF really? I know some of us know who TPLF is. Some of us may have a diluted understanding of what kind of organization it is. So who is TPLF?
TPLF was a very successful armed rebel in Ethiopia, right? In 1991, backed up with Eritrean troops, they were able to throw Derg and control the capital city of Ethiopia. And from then on, they dominated 90% of the economy. They controlled about 97% of the military. And during that time, you know, the Ethiopian peoples were tortured, killed, moved out of their homeland. You know, university professors, university students suffered inhumane condition. And so for the Ethiopian people, TPLF had become a terrorist organization that have been looting and robbing the people of Ethiopia for the last 3 decades, pretty much.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes, you know, for those that may not be necessarily connected to the politics and the history of Ethiopia, it sounds like we're just targeting one specific group and one specific ethnic group. However, I think for me, at least when I talk about TPLF and what that organization means, I'm not necessarily speaking about one ethnic group, right? The idea of TPLF and how TPLF was able to infiltrate a lot of the way policies and political situations are run in Ethiopia, it really came in different languages, in different forms, and in different genders, right? So it's not just one ethnic group we're talking about, it's just the idea of TPLF and how they've been able to organize from a very small ethnic group within Ethiopia and to being able to dominate everything that happened in Ethiopia for the last 30 years. And not to just kind of blanketly go over, I'd like to take a few minutes here to really talk about what really did happen, especially for those that may think, you know, the rule of TPLF was peaceful and happy dandy. Few things that I like to bring up is, you know, the Anuak genocide that not a lot of people know about, and which was committed in the southern part of Ethiopia, and many more that were you know, dislocated because their land was needed for that sense. And especially, as you mentioned, for the students, right? I remember in, I think, 2005, when we were the election in 2005. Could you tell us a bit about what happened during that time? Because I think that's a very important way to look at who TPLF is and what they target.
Yeah, and I think, you know, their cruelty started, you know, as soon as they were able to control the capital city, right? Because in 91, 92, you see the killing of Amhara leaders and Oromo leaders. And then from that on, then it goes on and you see massive resettlement in different areas of the country. And then the Sidama genocide, over 200 people, Sidamo people killed. And then, like you mentioned, the Anuak people were killed. About 1,500 people were killed from that ethnic group, which is a very a tiny ethnic group. I think they're about 100,000. And so it's a very big percentage when you look at it from that perspective, right?
Yeah.
And then you go on, and there is Ogaden, right? A lot of people were killed during that time. And then we come up to 2005, post-election. And even prior to that, university students, actually about 50 university students were killed because they wanted pretty much freedom of academic, you know, what they wanted to learn in class. And so, and it just continues on all the way until the end of, you know, 2018, right? And so, election, the same thing. The federal government actually said every federal force, official force was going to report to the prime minister directly, and they were allowed to use lethal weapon against peaceful protesters. And so, you know, we've seen a lot of innocent young men die about 43, and then they incarcerated about 20,000 people who were injured. I've heard stories of people with bullets just being thrown in detention centers. International media or anybody wasn't really allowed in the detention center. There was just a lot of chaos and a lot of abuse during that time, you know, all the way, like I said, to 2018. They've investigated religion and ethnic-based violence throughout the nation. And so I think the people of Ethiopia are well aware of the damage that TPLF has done. But I think, you know, with the current situation, it's just with what's being shared, right? The mass misinformation campaign of TPLF beneficiaries is just, it has taken over social media. And so for people who don't really know who TPLF is and how we got here, it's really deceiving, right? Because I'm telling you, there is rape, there is murder, and people are being killed solely based on their ethnicity. It's heartbreaking for anybody, you know, any decent human being. And so, you know, people, especially on social media, usually jump and say, you know what, this is not okay, as they should, right? But I think it's very important to know the backstory. How did we get here? What got us here? And what can we do about it?
Absolutely. I think even when you mention these things, I like I said, I spent most of my time here, right? And I remember visiting, I believe that was 2011. I wanted to visit the universities and all that stuff because, you know, it's just something that I've always wanted to do. And I remember seeing like people with rifles on each corner of like the buildings, and I was really confused as to like why would there be, you know, like a person that has these rifles just kind of like circulating around the school. It's just basically like to intimidate students. Like I just didn't understand, like, was there, you know, were they expecting someone to rob them? Is this a way that you were going to keep the students in line, right? And these are the small things that you can notice. And I remember watching the videos from Enricha a few years ago where people were just out and they just opened fire on them, right? These are unarmed people that they just open fire on them. And I remember the story of like this lady that was like walked all over because in the chaos of it, she fell down and people stepped on her while they were trying to run away and she died from that. And there were so many people that died from that as well. And I think for me, I have such a hard time listening, at least especially with the misinformation, like when people are pretending, oh, you know, TPLF gave you a 30-year of peaceful and prosperity, you know, all that awesomeness that, you know, we should be grateful for. And maybe there was a lot of peace in Tigray, but it wasn't true for a lot of the regions in Ethiopia, and especially when we're talking about like the way the government was set up and how that's continuing to affect the way things are run in Ethiopia right now. The root cause of it is the idea TPLF has brought with them, right? It doesn't matter if the name is changed to EPRDF and all the other, you know, regional TPLF versions of their own that they may have. By the end of the day, they are the ones that brought that idea, and they are the ones that held most of the political power, like you said, and they're the ones that have most of the economical side as well. So it's really difficult to say, oh, you know, it was a fair and happy system for us to live in, and we should be enraged right now that there's an unfair war against them that's happening. But to speak to like what the legacy of TPLF is, right? Like looking at what's going on in Ethiopia right now, how are you understanding or seeing, you know, the ethnic federalism, which is again the legacy of TPLF that is brought into Ethiopia, and all the prices are people are paying for it?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, we're reaping what they sowed, right? So after TPLF took power in 91, they pretty much divided the country into 9 different regional states. And it's pretty much like redlining, right? You're pretty much saying, this belongs to you and this belongs to you from this one to this one. So it's such a dangerous concept that has the potential to tear a country apart. And, you know, it's viewed within our community as a tactic used by TPLF to actually divide the country. And so, and we're seeing that being played out currently, right? Because we see, you know, a lot of ethnic violence just solely based on your ethnicity, you could be killed. And so it's such a heartbreaking system that has, like I said, the potential to destroy a country and to cause the death of many civilians who have no idea what politics is. I was last week I saw this image of a young girl, and it seems like they were doing like a pretty much an interview. I think she was from the Amhara region, and they were trying to interview her, like, you know, what's your name? Where are you from? What's going on? And she said, you know, they're having us move out of this area because we're Naftanya. And what's Naftanya? And she said, Wallahi, I don't know.
That's so sad.
I was crying for a good 15 minutes. And that's exactly what's happening in every region, whether it's in Tigray, whether it's in Amhara region or Gurage or Benishangul. These people have no idea what you're talking about. What's Naftanya or this and that, you know? And so, and people are fighting over a land, yet we don't have food to eat, you know? Yeah. And even just the basic concept of ethnic federation is just a poison that TPLF employed on Ethiopians, and we're seeing that currently.
Absolutely. I think it really is a poor man's politics, because, you know, for a poor country, what we need is not how do we divide and how do we make sure that somebody gets better resources or more resources than me, when it should be, you know, this region could grow these kinds of foods, so let's make sure that they grow that, and then this other region could do something else that, you know, we could be interdependent and we could support each other. But instead, the system has created this competition. And like you said, like, we're fighting over a land because there's that idea of the more land you have, the more resources that you could accumulate, the better you can help your people specifically, not Ethiopia, not Ethiopians, but your people. And that idea of you and me and like somebody else is almost like we're gotten out of that way of thinking of ourselves as humans, but are heavily relying on ourselves as either Amara or Romo or Tigray or whatever. And something that was really beautiful, one of our guests has said about, you know, how do we divide ourselves in this sense? And he said, you know, there's no such thing as Oromo people. There's no such thing as Amara people. There's no such thing as, you know, Anuak people, but there's such thing as, you know, Amharic speaking people, Oromo speaking people, Tigrinya speaking people. Because in Ethiopia, right, we're so diverse, it's so difficult to say, oh, you're just one ethnic group and that's what you're going to go with, and you should live in that region for your safety. And even for them to be able to really embed this into our education and really teach us these things to a point where we bought it. And some things, sometimes you find yourself like, oh, oops, like, is that what I'm supposed to be thinking, right? That's kind of like soaked into our DNA, that we have to really be mindful and untangling from that mindset as well. So moving on from there, I know this kind of might sound silly, but especially now looking at all the misinformation that's going around, who started this war?
I mean, we've seen it move through stages, right? Mm-hmm. You know, was them refusing to peacefully negotiate and moving into the region of Tigray, right? Which I personally take as if they're pretty much trying to move their dictatorship into that specific region, merely just based, you know, just because they're from that ethnic group. And so, and then you see it play out. We have Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed sending the Minister of Peace to the region, who literally was crying in front of them, by the way, while they were making fun of her, because you can see on the camera, I don't know if you've seen it, Debretsion and a lot of the other regional leaders making fun of her while she's literally reading her script, and she is in tears. And then you see mothers going to the region, and some of them kneeling on their knees, right, crying. We don't want, they didn't say this region, this ethnic group, this person, that person. They said, we don't want to lose anybody. They said, this is not a time where we should be getting into war in the middle of a pandemic, right? And they were crying for every young man, whether he's in the military or whether he is just a civilian in Tigray or Addis Ababa, wherever it may be. And you see that fell over and over again. And he's sent famous people to the region as well, who've tried to do the same thing, advise them to come to the table. And again, these multiple attempts that the prime minister had, attempted failed. And then you see them defying a federal law, right? A federal ban to hold a regional election. And then going as far as threatening the sitting, it's sometimes, to me, it's like a drama. It's something so unreal to me. Especially, I think, when you think of it from a perspective of a Western world, maybe that's, I'm so used to now the lifestyle of the Western. And so I'm like, could this happen here?
No, there's no way.
Just happening to me. And then you see them starting to threaten, right? They hold their own election. And I felt like the prime minister's attitude was just like, let's see what they will do, And so you see, they hold the election and they start threatening on different medias, after September 30, we want to acknowledge the federal government, which is a pretty big offense, like you wouldn't make on a federal government. And then you see them literally, I saw one of the interviews, and I don't know his name, but I remember him saying, Abiy Ahmed is not even going to get the opportunity that Mengistu did, that, we're going to take him out. And like, when I'm seeing these in my head, I'm wondering, like, these people look so confident that, how are they thinking this playing out, right? Because at the end of the day, war always has a cost attached to it. I think anyone with a decent mindset would understand, right? There's a lot of things that are, and it costs lives, right? Civilians' life, it costs military man life who've dedicated their life to serving and protecting their country. And so it was interesting, to say the least. And then, of course, on November 4, we found out that they started executing on their plan to attacking a sitting federal government, and they attacked our military man overnight, in which they collaborated and took full credit during one of their interviews. I don't know if it was accidentally or if it was intentional.
Yeah.
I remember listening to it, and he pretty much was like, we attacked them like a lightning strike. And you see, and to me, it was like,
let me play that video for you real quick.
የትግራይ ህዝብ ግልጽ የሆነ አደጋ ላይ መግባቱን በመገምገም ከውስጥም ከውጭም ከላይም ደግሞ በኢሳያስ አፈወርቂ በሁሉም አቅጣጫ ትግራይን ለመጨፍለቅ የታሰበው ሴራ ጫፍ ላይ መድረሱን በመገንዘብ ፈጣን እርምጃ መውሰድ ነበረበት። ለዚህም ነው የሰሜን እዝን ከተባበሩት እጃችንን አናነሳም ካሉት የእዙ አባላት ጋር በመተባበርና ሊተባበሩ ፈቃደኛ ያልሆኑትን ደግሞ በኃይል ተልኳቸው እንዳይወጡ ዲሞቢላይዝ ወይም ደግሞ ዲስቴብላይዝ በማድረግ የተደረገ እንቅስቃሴ ነው። በጣም ፈጣን የሆነ እርምጃን የተወሰደው በኦልሞስት በ45 ደቂቃ ውስጥ እዙን በሙሉ ለመቆጣጠር የተቻለበት ነው። አንዳንድ ፖኬቶች ላይ ከቀሩት ውጪ እንግዲህ ይሄ እርምጃ
So that's basically them admitting. And for those that may not understand Amharic, could you translate what he just said for us?
Yeah, he pretty much was saying, I think they were in the assumption that Eritrean forces and the Ethiopian military were going to close in on them. And so he said he was going, they pretty much took the initiative. So they said, we're going to take the first offense instead. And they pretty much attacked. And I think as you go further, you actually hear him say like, Mebrakawi Yohana Takat, which means like an attack, like a lightning strike. And because they did it overnight. And so it's the most shameless internal betrayal of the era to me. Because and I don't know a lot of history, a lot of politics, but I don't know, maybe, you know, during the Civil War, America have experienced such thing, right? And so, but you rarely see your own people attack your own national defense force. And so it's just really sad to see that. But then again, I think the other thing to remember, although he says they did the attack like a lightning strike, they have put a lot of effort and strategy behind it. I was listening to Prime Minister Abiy's press release or his meeting with the parliament or representatives. And so he said they actually attacked 200 sites at a time. And so if you think about how much effort and strategy and planning goes behind such a thing, so it backs up their confidence of threatening a federal government. So, but then I think I see in our community, some people don't realize the magnitude of this damage. You know, had we had, you know, the military submitted, right, or back, I don't think some people understand the magnitude of the issue. Like, you know, had we succeeded, what would have happened? Where would we be today? I think that's a really important concept to remember, because just because we were able to contain it, it doesn't mean that it didn't have the potential to have such a chaos like we see in so many other countries like Syria and Libya, you know, Somalia, a lot of different countries that are facing, you know, crisis.
Absolutely. And I think now this whole conversation is trying to shift into, like, you know, we were always asking for independence, whereas that conversation never was part of the negotiations or any of the dealings that happened in the 2-3 years that they were, you know, staying in Tigray and, you know, solidifying their stronghold. And also another thing that they were very, very confident about it is that, you know, they had more military power than the whole of Ethiopia. I think that's the part that made it seem like, you know, we're going to start this war and we're going to win it. And I don't think they had any doubts in their mind that they were going to come out of the war as winners. And I'm not sure what the end of that would have been like. Were they thinking to go back to power and, you know, be leaders again, or was this just you know, Ethiopia starts and ends with us kind of mindset? But there was this speech that I heard also, right, when he was talking about, you know, war is a way to negotiate. So basically using, you know, the how you rack up bodies from a war, using that as a means to negotiate and get the things that you want. And it really belittles how we should think about war, right? Right now, when we're talking about how horrific the war is in Tigray and all the videos that are coming out and the pictures that are coming out, it's terrifying. Like, that something like that should not happen to a human being at all. Like, you know, but that was seen as a way to gain whatever they want. It's like a means to negotiate. And I'm going to play a video for you as well. And it just shows how it was just a nonchalant thing that they were warmongering before the war started, as if, you know, war will give us the things that we want if nothing else works out.
ባለፉት 2 ዓመታት ንትርኮች ረዝመዋልና ማለቅ አለበትም ብለዋል። በየትኛው አኳኋን እንዲያልቅልህ ነው የምትፈልገው? ትግራይ የትኛውን እርምጃ ስትወስድ ነው ማለቅ ያለበት ነው የምትለው?
ቶሎ ተጠናቆ ወደሚቀጥለው ምዕራፍ መግባት አለብን። የራሳችን ሀገር መገንባት አለብን። ስለዚህ ይሄ አሁን ያለው መጓተት ማብቃት አለበት። በተቻለ ፍጥነት አብቅቶ ወደሚቀጥለው ምዕራፍ መሄድ አለብን። ወደዛ እንድንመለስ ቶሎ ፋይል መዝጋት አለበት። በሚዘጋ ሜቢ ጦርነትም ላይ ከፋ ይችላል። ጦርነት ወደ ድርድር መምጫ መንገድ ነው፣ ወደ ድርድር ማምጫ መንገድ ነው። እንዲጦዝ እንፈልጋለን። አክቹአሊ ቶሎ መጠናቀቅም አለበት። ጦርነቱ ማሳጠር ነው ያለብን። ካስፈለገ ፕሪኤምፕቲቭ ስትራይክ ሁሉ መጠቀም አለብን። ምክንያቱም መራዘሙ ለኛ ማለት የተወሰነ ድረስ መቆየቱ ጠቅሞን ሊሆን ይችላል። ከዚህ በላይ መራዘሙ ግን ብዙም አይጠቅመንም። ስለዚህ ማሳጠር ነው ያለብን።
So could you tell us what he just said and reflect on his speech as well?
Yeah, he pretty much, I mean, like you said, he's pretty much saying at any cost, you know, we'll do what we need to do to be able to get a chance at negotiation, right? You know, I think this is not the first time I've heard this kind of speech. You've seen it even before the war. You see throughout this whole process, you see them moving in phase. Okay, and maybe because I'm very analytic, I think of it this way. But you see them moving in phase, like, you know, portraying the prime minister and Isaias as if they were ganging up on them and trying to attack them, and yet before anybody else did anything, they attacked their own national defense force, right? And then you know, after, well, even prior to that, you heard the, you know, war is our traditional game, and that trying to empower young men, you know, in that region to come out and fight, right? But then it's like, as an individual, what am I fighting for, right? If I was living in Megale, that's what I would be asking, right? And then you see, you know, as soon as the government started the offense, you see, like Getachew Reda, I remember one of his interview, he said, this is Hizbawi Toranet, which is like, this is pretty much a civil war, right? And he said, we come out with your spoon and with your axe and fight. And I'm like, are we, like, what is the message that we're telling? Because if that was your mom and your kids living in that city, would you be telling that kind of speech? Because you're pretty much asking those people to fight a well-equipped federal troop, right, or a national defense force or whatever, with an axe and whatever you have in your house. And so it's heartbreaking. And another thing that really surprises me is the number of Tigrayans who don't speak out against this. Because if it was me, I think, as I am right now, I am on fire about it. I get really angry because at the end of the day, it's our brothers and sisters who are dying. 15, 16, 17, 18 years old man, 20, 23-year-old young man who has probably have no idea who TPLF is or what they've been doing in Ethiopia for the last 30 years. They just know what they're telling them today. And so they're brainwashing these young men to sacrifice their life so they can, you know, grab power for another many years, because they have no intention of protecting the Tigrayan people or liberating them. What are you liberating them from? You were in power for the last 30 years. And there are people who have no clean water and electricity, who live in a stone house. And so it's just even the very notion of that idea of, you know, come out and die for me so I can have 2, 3, 4 years of power and dominate the economy. And, you know, my kids lavish life in the Western, while, you know, ask a poor mother to sacrifice 2, 3 kids. So to me, it's very inhumane. And I think oftentimes when I see, especially social media, Twitter, and I see a lot of people trying to defend TPLF as if, you know, they are doing this to benefit a group of people. It makes me, in a way, doubt some people. You know, of course, often just TPLF beneficiaries who won't have a job or can't afford to pay their rent, you know, should they lose power. But it's still, I think, as a decent human being, I would think would speak out against it, because it's just pure inhumane for them to ask such thing from people who've already been struggling to sacrifice their life just so they can grab power.
Absolutely. I think the other side of this as well is how, because when we were looking at, you know, the last 30 years and who has the money, who has the resources, and who's living big, we associate that with Tigray, which is unfortunate, because if we actually gone to Tigray, like you said, they're not any more developed than the rest of the country, right? So the fact that TPLF was in power for 30 years, the people, the citizens, actually did not benefit. They didn't have the hospitals, they didn't have the schools. And I remember last year, even there was a water shortage, and they were asking for federal funding and what Abiy was going to do about it and such. And I was, you know, that was for me really confusing. Like, what did you all do with all the money that was smuggled out of the country? Like, you weren't even useful for, quote unquote, your own people, the people that you claim are your own, and the people you claim are you're liberating from. They're still living as poor as the rest of the country. But the thing is, the rest of the country may not necessarily realize that, so they could harbor this hate of thinking, you know, they took everything from us mindsets that they have. And I remember watching, I think recently, maybe it's on The Guardian, a 7-year-old that lost both of her legs from this war, both of her legs, 7-year-old. And I just, what are we fighting for? Like, really, who are we? Like you said, it's just a really difficult situation to say so, because why can't we say, you know, yes, you know, we've seen a lot of the Western media saying, you know, Abiy is responsible, Prime Minister Abiy should stop, ceasefire and all that stuff. Why is everybody not realizing that they could enforce, they could say the same things to TPLF, to the person that started the war, to the people that have been warmongering this, to the people that have accumulated more arms power than the entire country of Ethiopia, to the people that launched missiles on Amara regions, into Ethiopia, basically, right, into Eritrea. And realizing that and just things not adding up, for me, is it really that difficult? Is the misinformation really that powerful that people can't see through it all? Or is it just wanting only to look at the current situation and the immediacy of it and seeing who's losing the war and thinking that, oh, this small group is, you know, the underdogs are losing the war and they're being discriminated against and such? Which one do you think is happening, and how, like, what is going on in that sense?
They have been in power for 30 years. And I think now that things are, I don't want to say better, but situated in Ethiopia, right? Where, you know, you have the right to speak, you have the right to write whatever, YouTube, blog, whatever, which weren't allowed when TPLF was in power, right? Mm-hmm. We know certain media, and if you watch them, you can actually go to prison for it. And so I feel like they have been in power for 30 years. They have relationship. They have the money. They you know, and they were ready. So this wasn't, you know, we're going to do this today. This was planned out, like I said, in phase from, you know, okay, we're going to threaten, right? And we're going to hopefully freeze the prime minister, because the prime minister, in all honesty, and I think everyone is entitled to their own perception of who the prime minister is and whatnot, right?
Absolutely.
But I have this person. It's been 3 years, right? But he goes in, and I remember listening to one of his press release, and him saying, you know, they literally let him into his office and let him out his office, and he had guards following him everywhere, and that was the year of his prime ministership, right? And so, and finally this happened, and then they, you know, pretty much started threatening him and doing all kind of things. And so the fact that they were actually able to have such an impact to remove a deep-rooted system that had controlled the economy sector, the military up and down, you know, we're talking about, you know, from the parliament all the way to local level leadership. To uproot that, that's a 30 years of poison deeply rooted within the system. And I believe there's still TPLF operatives all over Addis Ababa, all over the city and the country. And I think today, sitting on today and looking back, we see it as such simple thing, but it's really not. It's a very complex situation. And so, like I said, I think they had a PR firm, lobbyists ready to go, prepared, you know, in phases. Like, you know, like I said earlier, we're going to try to threaten, freeze the government. Hopefully he comes into submission, right? As a new president who doesn't even have at the time key to his office. Hopefully he says, you know what, you guys do what you need to do, or resign or something, right? Or can bring him to their side. And if that doesn't work, we're gonna go into war, right? And if that doesn't work, then we're gonna label ourselves as victims and pretty much cry out to the world to come to the rescue. That's how I see it, because you see that happening all the way throughout, right? Yeah. And they started, you know, as soon as they lost the war, they started saying, you know, they started screaming genocide, which is a really gross representation of what's been happening, right? There is no genocide. A genocide is if someone comes to kill me solely because I am from a certain group, or I am Black, or I am whatever, right?
Yeah.
You can't claim genocide after waging a war on a federal government for 2 years and preparing more than 200 militia, right? And it's like, but however, they were able to convince a lot of people that it is a genocide, right?
Yeah.
So they have, and this is just my point of view about it. They have stages of how they battle the different things they think, and that's been in their favor. The false narrative has gained acceptability, and representatives and congressmen and media, they were able to control. But I think it's important, at least for the Ethiopian community, to speak out against it, right? And truly, what is the truth, and how did we get here? That's
Absolutely. And I think I'll say this over and over again, saying this is not saying that a war is not going on in Tigray. It's not saying that there are thousands dying and thousands more flooding and so many people suffering from this. And even though the war is, done for the most part, there's still fights that's going on that is disturbing the day-to-day lives of people. There's still rape cases that have been reported, even though the war is done, right? This is a gruesome war by any measure of senses. But that doesn't necessarily, for me, again, like what I struggle with, like you said, was genocide is, when we see what happened in Shashamene, when people showed up with a list of names, right, knocked on your doors and knew who lived where and skipped houses that they know, a certain group of people don't live there. That's a very much targeted, like, I'm coming to your house to do this specific thing. Whereas this was a war that TPLF started while sitting in Tigray, right? They could have just easily done that while sitting in Afar. They could have just easily done that while sitting anywhere else, right? But they chose Tigray because they're going to use the people of Tigray as a shield to gain their political power, whatever, by any means necessary, because they've been living terrifying. The Tigrayan people saying, you're surrounded by enemies and I'm the only one that could protect you. And this narrative are being fed to the people so much. And there are so many activists, 4 or 5 years ago that I used to follow from all kinds of regions that continually said, you cannot blame the people of Tigray because they don't know any better, because they have one TV channel, one radio channel. And all the time they're being told, that TPLF is their liberator. They're surrounded by the Amara militia and by, Shabia, like Eritrea, and such, that they're in constant fear and constant anxiety of being attacked at any given moment. So of course, when this war started, of course, they're going to get up and try to fight this war, because they don't realize that this war is not their war, right? This war is not against them. And that's why I'm so adamant about not calling this war a war on Tigray, as everybody else is trying to say it. And I say it, it's a TPLF's war in Tigray region, because this is absolutely has nothing to do, we may not like Abiy or like him, Abiy, like you said. I don't think it was him saying, I'm going to get up today and, destroy the Tigrayans, and just because, they've been leading for 30 years and this is whatever it is, hates, as they've been calling it. But you can't start something and then when it doesn't go your way, scream, genocide now. It just doesn't, it's not, for me, it just seems like by any means necessary, I'm going to continue to win. And there was also that same, rape case that this girl went around talking about how she was raped, and it was proven that she wasn't even at the areas that she was claiming to be. And for me, it was such a heartbreaking thing, because we know these rape cases are real. Why can't we give the victims the due diligence of at least telling their stories, dignify them in that sense, as opposed to trying to create some, drummed up narrative so that you could quickly get that news cycle into your side, so you could continue to feed these things in, like in the phases that you're talking about, because they did that first, and then there was a whole bunch of misinformation. And then I think about a month ago, I saw them happening where they're saying, the Northern Command myth. And I was so confused. I was like, what are you talking about? Because like you said, the phases is like, now they're even completely denying the fact that, like, they started the war. right? They're calling it a myth. And like, is there no shame or I guess sense of responsibility or accountability? Are we really fighting with just human beings that have lost touch to their humanity? Is that what's going on? Because if that's the case, then how are the Tigrayan people going to survive? How's that region going to survive?
Yeah, I see. To me personally, so I see TPLF. So I try not to associate Tigrayans with TPLF, and I know it has been for a lot of people. It's like, how do you do that? I personally, I like to compartmentalize things, right? So I'm able to do that easily because I say the two things in my head has nothing to do with each other, right? Like, it's a really hard concept for some people to swallow, but they are pretty much, despite being pardoned, despite being, just pretty much like, let's forget what happened for the last 30 years and move on. They are. And I think they wanted what at any cost. They didn't care how many people will die. I think even when you think about the people of Tigray, they have suffered for the last 40 years. These people in war after war, there were drought. Like we know there was 2.5 million people or safety net. And so, and then the whole locust thing that happened right before. And so all that history, would you drag these people again into another war that could pretty much do the same damage it did 40 years ago? And so I think even that idea to me is just, is the most, just annoying, right? It's like, how do you tell someone you care about them, but then you drag them into such a mess? And so, but like I said, I think they said at any cost we're going to do this thing, and I think they had to really, with the money they have and with the planning and the strategy they put behind it, I think they truly, I think they still do, believe that they can tear Ethiopia apart and execute on the plan they put in place when they came in 1991 with the ethnic integration as they're exiting. That's how I see it. I see it. I usually say TPLF has like an abusive relationship with the people of Ethiopia. If I have you, no one else. Kind of attitude, which is such an ugly concept, but it is so. And so I think, like that whole tactic of having that ethnic federation. And I felt like as they're exiting, and for, whenever they were in power, they were always instigating religious-based conflicts and ethnic-based conflicts. And they were trying to pretty much tell everybody, like, it's self-determination, right? Protect your land, protect this and that, which is, again, trying to divide the nation, right? But we know with division, no one survives, right? It's only through unity that we can be powerful as a country. And so it's just heartbreaking to see that happening.
Yeah. And honestly, it's only, people that want to live in tyranny, they need that division, right? Because if you're really going to rule in unity, then you need to have your head in the right direction, thinking, beyond your ethnicity, beyond everything else, and really saying, the reason why we're here is because we're all Ethiopians. And beyond that, the reason why we're all here is we happen to be human beings that we can't live without each other, right? And working through that. And then I'm not saying, Ethiopia is all happy and dandy. Like, we've done so many horrible things to each other, but the good outweighs the bad for the most part. And not being able to discuss those things openly is something that we lost in the last especially in the last few years. It's gotten so heightened where you can't talk about issues that are happening in Ethiopia without disclosing what ethnicity you are, so that you are quote unquote qualified to talk about it, as if me being Ethiopian is not enough to talk about issues. And that's something that we have inherited, whether we like it or not, to say, this is my group, this is my ethnicity, this is my people, and this is what I'm going to do. And that's what they've given us. I'm going to share some video with you. One of their supporters talking about how he's happy because he's seeing Ethiopia family falling apart.
ምኮራበት አንዱ ነገር የኔ ትውልድ ማለት ነው ኢትዮጵያ ስትፈርስ ቆሜ ማየቴ ነው በአይኔ ማየቴ ነው በተግባር ዝም ብሎ በፕሮፓጋንዳ ምናምን አይደለም
Like, how do you use a language, an Ethiopian language, to say that you're happy to see it fall apart?
Yeah, I have no words. I like I said, it's the disregard. Forget Ethiopia as a country, right? Maybe he just what do they say? You first have to liberate your mind, right? Be able to move on. And I felt like, you know, some people are just tied or imprisoned in their own mind of what things should look like, right? But then again, I think it's the disregard. To me personally, what gets to me is the disregard for the human life, right? Because like these things don't come freely. They're not offered, right? You know, a country is built with blood and bone, as they say. It truly is built on blood and bone. Mothers, kids, fathers, young man, young woman. And so the fact that they publicly go in such a renown, if I could say that, media, going out and representing that company, a group of people, and saying such claim. But again, I think these people have somebody controlling them. I don't know if it's a PR firm, a lobbyist, whatever. They are being told, say this, do this, and do that. And so when they're doing these things, they are communicating to a specific group of people. And I think that have worked for them so far. You know, they share stories about rape, or they share stories about starvation. They're able to grab a group of people, and they share stories about violence and how they this and that. They grab a specific group of people. And so I felt like they have strategy behind everything they say and do. But again, it's such inhumane for them to incite these kind of things, right? Because you've seen even with hate, right? I remember seeing, what's his name? Alula Salamon saying, like, do not eat injera and this and this and dashrom and it's crazy to me. Then you have some other lady, I don't know her name, like if you're married to a Sahara man or a woman, you must divorce and this and that. And, you know, I've heard stories that those things actually took place in reality, right? But again, is this something acceptable within society? Like, you know, have a specific people they're going after. So it's just heartbreaking to see it.
Absolutely. I think I'm glad you brought that up, because I've heard people personally that divorced because now they're on different political stands. But for me, you know, there's a value in family. There's such powerful value in family. Like, the healthier your family is, the healthier your country is going to be. So you're even okay with breaking up families, something God has put together, to say because you have a different political stance or because your ethnicity is different. Not that you're from different species, right? We're all human beings. Because of that. And this is not something first time I've heard it, right? We've heard quite a lot of nationalists, like ethnic nationalists, say this, where if you're married to this specific ethnic group, go ahead and, you know, divorce them, or there are women of, you know, this group that you should go marry and all such. And I don't know how they're not ashamed to say such things. But then at the same time, though, you kind of have to feel compassion for them, because if they really believe these things that they say, how much hate they would have in their hearts, and how much of a stressful that life would be, and how much hope you don't have, and the only thing you could, you know, reflect back is hate to this world, right? That's such, I don't know, that's such a sad life to live. It's such a sad life to live, where you don't, your hope is dependent on the fact that you're specifically associated with an ethnic group, and you're absolutely okay moving that hate that you have and teaching to your kids, because now they're little kids talking these things and they put them on YouTube thinking, you know, look at what my kid said, as if they did something really amazing. But for me, why won't you let your kids, you know, be kids and figure out, you know, what is on TV or what YouTube to watch, or which, you know, are they going to take the mom's phone or the dad's phone without seeing them? Those are the things that the kids should be worried about, not that some land that they've never heard of is being taken away by some ethnic groups that they don't even know what it is, and they put this hate into these children's mouth. and they say it back. And it's very unfortunate even to think about what is the next generation going to look like, as far as, you know, when we're talking about this now, but the Tigrayan nationalism, I don't even know if that's a thing anymore, and the Oromo nationalists as well. Like, we're seeing these things happen, and I'm just like, why can't we leave the kids out of this hate, this equation? But it's I don't know why that's a difficult thing for them to understand. But I'm not sure where we could go from there, as far as, is this a one generation thing, or are we going to continue to have to educate and fight this war for the next 30, 40 years to be able to say, you know, there's one Ethiopia and that's the only way we can survive, truly survive. Not to say, you know, we need to have the old Ethiopia back, but we need to create an Ethiopia that would be survivable for all of us. But we can't do that without being one.
Yeah, it's only, unity is power. And that's something the Westerns realized a long time ago. And it's heartbreaking to see Africans still struggle with that concept, right? I mean, look at us, right? We're just like, well, like world-renowned country, right? That went through civil war, and you end up uniting, different states together and doing this. And so for any, let alone African country, but for anybody to survive, I think that's togetherness is important. And I think, to me, the most heartbreaking thing, like you said, is that, oftentimes Ethiopians are not like the richest people, right? And the only thing you're inheriting your kids is that hate, and that division, that concept of, you hate this person because they're from this ethnic group, not giving that person the opportunity to share with you who they are, right? You're just saying, this is black and it's not good. This is red and it's not good. It's literally saying that.
Yeah.
Right? Just labeling these people based on ethnicity, and saying, you hate this person and you're going to grow up with it because they're from this region, and you hate this person because they speak this specific language. And so to me, shame on the parents, but I think, and I hope and pray that these kids get the opportunity to grow up and hopefully find a way to know that's not true, right? But yeah, I see it all over the internet, from little kids to grown-up people who've never visited Ethiopia or who don't even speak the language, saying ethnic-based hate and speech, and it's heartbreaking. I think I personally, this is the last phase of our suffering in this ethnic federation, and I have high hope that the PM would reform the constitution once everything starts settling, right? Because I think if we keep it, I think we'll be in. If we keep this structure and this system, I think we'll only be heading downhill. But high hopes that things will change. I think, like I said, I feel like there's still a lot of TPLF operative within the system that are doing a lot of still instigating violence based on who you are or what you look like, what you sound like. But as a country, I hope that we can come together and truly create a better future for the next generation and start that healing process for the sake of the next generation.
Absolutely. So how do we fight, this misinformation that is currently, taking over the foreign relations and the foreign policies that is being enforced in Ethiopia or will be enforced in Ethiopia, and at the same time be able to speak, for the suffering of people in the Tigrayan region?
Yeah, I think the first step is that we have to acknowledge there is a cost attached to war. Okay, and that war is being paid by Tigrayans who live in that region, right? And so I think that's important to acknowledge, right? As a society, there is suffering happening. For God's sakes, they released 30,000 inmates who've been in prison for who God knows what crime, whether they are murderers or rapists or whatnot. And so 30,000 inmates have been set free. And are they going to raping women? Are they killing and robbing people? Possibly, right? You know, and maybe the Ethiopian military committing such crime, Eritrean committing, we don't know, right? With the information we have, we don't. But the fact of the matter is, there is bad things happening, right?
Yeah.
And I think we have to separate. For me, I've always seen the people of Tigray as the people of Tigray, TPLF as TPLF. They are self-serving, power-hungry men who've controlled and dominated, killed and tortured thousands of innocent people just because they were more educated or just because they spoke up. And so we have to separate those two things, right? You have a bunch of mafia who've been committing such crime, and you have innocent civilians who have no idea what politics is. And so I think as a society, we have to separate those things. And I think we have to say, how do we help our people come out of this, right? How do we help in a way that, you know, that truly helps them? Because for one thing, we know, I think the whole country, let alone, you know, Ethiopians understand that TPLF can care less about Tigrayans, period. And they have shown that over and over again, like I said earlier, from suggesting the people to come out with their spoon and axe to fight a federal troop, into, you know, now trying to empower young men to come and fight with federal troops without uniform, without, you know, any sort of training. So I think, and then I think the other part is, like, I wish a lot of Tigrayans who have family members there and who are more educated or more aware of the political arena would speak up against that. You know, it's so inhumane to me, just to grant a few politicians who have been doing this for 30 years, just a few more years of power, you're losing the lives of young men at age 20 and 21 and 23. And so I wish they would come out and speak up against it, because I think it makes me furious, if I'm honest. And then the expectation from, of course, the Ethiopian community is to stand together and find ways to help. We're always going to have TPLF beneficiaries who are going to go out and tell people, you know, go bomb Addis Ababa, or go bomb this, kill this person because they're Amhara, they're Oromo, whatever. And so, but the only way that we can fight and truly be there for our people is standing in unity and not buying into the propaganda and misinformation. Because like I said, they have the money, they have the resource, they have the strategy behind it, and they are doing this in phase. And if you pay attention, you see that playing out. But I think we as a society have the responsibility to find ways to truly help our people.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you everyone for joining us. I hope everybody's learning quite a lot from this conversation. I'd like to remind everyone to go ahead and share and like this conversation, and we'll be right back after a quick break.
Adebabay media የኔ ነው። Adebabay media የኔም ነው።
Adebabay media የኔ ነው።
Adebabay media የሁላችንም ነው።
የኛ ቤተሰብ Adebabay ሚዲያን ይመለከታል። የእናንተስ?
Do your parents watch Adebabay media?
Watch, follow, subscribe and help Adebabay. Adebabay media ለወገንተኝነት ጀርባውን የሰጠ።
እንነጋገር ና አብይ ና ደጉ ና ለማ ኑ ሁላችንም መሪዎች ኑ ቁጭ ብለን እናቶቻችን እንዳያለቅሱብን እናደግ ብላችሁ ተሰብስባችሁ ሰላም ልታመጡልን ይገባችኋል። እባክዎትን በኢትዮጵያ እናቶች ስም፣ በኢትዮጵያ ወላጅ እናቶች ስም እጠይቃለሁ። እሺ አንድ ሁኑልንና ልጆቻችን ሁላችሁም የኛ ልጆች ናችሁ። አንድ ሁኑና ሰላም አውርዱልን።
This video gets me every time, because I think this speaks to what you were saying earlier. People, in anywhere, really, in anywhere, especially mothers are tired of losing their children to war. Yesterday I was playing, we're just trying to see like how long Ethiopia has been in war. And we started counting from the Second World War, right? That was in the 40s. And then there was, that chaos in the 60s. And there was a Derg coming in the 80s. And then there is Ihadi TPLF coming in early 90s. And then the war was Eritrea in, I believe, 98. And now this war. And it feels like, we've been in war every 20, 15 years constantly. And of course, we're not going to grow. How would you grow? How would a country that is poor will grow when we are constantly in war, and finding a reason and justifications to kill each other? And of course, we're going to be in a lot of pain because we've caused each other so much pain. And it's going to take a lot of work, like we've been saying, to recover from this. But what are other issues in Ethiopia that you've been following?
I think it's there is a lot going on in Ethiopia, right? We started talking about how ethnic federation and that we're ripping the fruit of it now. And so there is a lot of innocent life being killed all over the country, right? Amhara region, Oromo region, Gurage, Gambela, Benishangul. You hear all across Ethiopia, there is just a lot of chaos. And we're losing human lives. And I think that's I recently was listening to an interview, and they were having an argument of whether this many people died from this ethnic group versus this many people died from this ethnic group. And they were really fired up about it. And it was just a full conversation. And I said, now we're fighting over dead people, and I think that is the worst of the worst, right? So it's sad to see that. But so hopefully we're able to move away from that and say, we lost a human being, someone who has a mother and a father, and and then I think you hear also just people out of job, right? Just people who are now having to rob other people or beat up and stuff like that, especially in the major cities. And so that's another concerning thing. Should we move out? And then there's the election going on. So there's a lot of things going on. And then we have COVID. So I think it's a really time for a third world country. A new PM in power, and the prior power was pretty much a dictator that controlled every aspect of the economy and the military and everything. And then now trying to move into this. So there's a lot of things going on, but I think people have to realize the only way we can overcome this is togetherness. And let's be human first. I think that's the only way we can come out of this, is let's be human first. If someone dies, first it should be that a human died, right? And maybe close to that, it's Ethiopians have history of more than 3,000 years. So when people say, oh, Oromo, it's like, oh, really? You think you're just Oromo and you live in this continent for more than 3,000 years? And so I think that whole thing is just a false ideology, right? And so I think I hope that we can start thinking as a human and remove that label that have been given to us for the last 30 years and truly genuinely care about people because they're human first.
Absolutely. I think that idea of fighting for the hierarchy of suffering is quite distressful as well for me. Like you said, watching, this many, having to fight which ethnic group lost the most, ignoring that human beings have lost. And by then we all lost, right? We all lost as Ethiopians, as human beings, we lost, and that should have been enough. And to be able to get out of this, it's going to take a lot of work. I think even, challenging ourselves individually, even though we think we're beyond this mindset, we might be surprised by how, no matter how small it is, it might have influenced us. And not being really willing to self-investigate and really see, like, am I really open to see for the suffering of everyone in Ethiopia? Everyone in Ethiopia, regardless of what their leaders have done, regardless of what their leadership look like, regardless of what history you may have with that specific groups, that whatever may be happening. I think to be human and to stay in that compassionate place, it's really important to keep that in mind. Also, another thing that I've been doing lately, as far as like following Ethiopian history, is really like finding positive stories that are coming out. And it's been really awesome. Can I share one with you?
Yes, of course, I would love that.
So I met this guy a while ago, and he was telling me about this project that he was doing in Afar region. So he watched this documentary. He's just a citizen, and saw that, in Afar, when students go to school in the morning, one thing they struggle the most with is because they have to walk really far, and it's a desert. So by the time they get to school, they're really thirsty and they struggle with that. So they tend to not go to school as much and such. So what he did was he bought this tool from Amazon for $400, bought a whole bunch of backpacks and a whole bunch of water bottles, and took it to one school in Afar, and he drilled holes in a few places between where students would come from their houses to the school on their route to school. And he gave them those backpacks and those water bottles. So now these students could go to school, and in the middle of their thirsty, they could pump water and drink and make it to school, And I thought that was such a beautiful story, that if all of us could do, that small thing that we could do when we go to Ethiopia, right? $400 is really not much when you think about it, and be really inspired in those things where, yes, it's hard to see all the things that are happening. Sometimes we feel so helpless, but there are some things that we could do that is in our control. That's something that we could do ourselves, and gives us, that relief of like, not everything that's happening in Ethiopia is bad. And I think when you're so soaked in the news, it feels like the country is falling apart, but it really is not, because there's so many loving people that are hiding their neighbors when they needed help, that are feeding their neighbors, that are helping each other, that are making sure, each of them are staying in life. Those people that are helping those that are sick from the COVID, and making sure they have food to eat. And I think there's a lot of positive story in there, that when we start watching that idea of like Ethiopia is falling apart sense won't exist, won't be there, because you have an alternative, topics that we could talk about. So that's all I have.
Yeah, there's a lot, and I think our history shows our resilience, right?
Mm-hmm.
History. Even maintaining we don't have Independence Day, right? I always feel proud whenever, I usually introduce myself saying, born and raised in Ethiopia, every time I meet new people. So, where is Ethiopia? And I always feel proud to say, one of the only country never been colonized. And so I hope that we continue to share the good image of Ethiopia, and then continue to preach our unity, because I think it's only in oneness that we can overcome this dark days.
Yeah, absolutely. So what works do you have for the youth to encourage them to, to be involved in, speaking truth and highlighting issues that are happening in Ethiopia, and helping whatever means they can? Do you have any words for those?
I think first, the work that TPLF beneficiaries have been doing for the last 5 months is distorting the image of Ethiopia, and there is no denying. And then on top of that, we have a crime hand. We're ripping the fruit of the poison they have given us. They've been working for the last 30 years. And so there is a lot of chaos. There is a lot of noise. And I feel like we have been in the silent majority mode for the last 30 years. I feel like the majority of the people are still the silent majority, right? Now we've been given, like, you can speak, you can say whatever you want, but we're still in that mode of like, I'd rather not say anything. And so but we have to, right? Because I see it personally, I see there is only two sides. Okay, there is a side that wants to tear Ethiopia apart, and there is a side that wants to, continue our unity. So regardless of what you believe, and and then there is another layer, of like, I don't support Abiy, this and that, right? And that has nothing to do with you wanting our country to go on, right? And preach unity and fight for what's true, right? And so, and then I think that's why we struggle so much in correcting that narrative, because there's further division even within the people that want unity and that want Ethiopia to continue based on political use and whatnot. But I don't think it's the time to divide amongst each other based on your political view, right? You don't have to support the guy, right? You don't have to be for him, but can you be for unity? And can we, once and for all, remove this poison that's killing human beings, right? Not Amara, not Oromo, not Tigray, whatever, but human lives. Right? And how do we stop that? And I feel like some people feel like when you say that, you're asking them not to speak out against the government, right? Or ask, hold the government accountable. And that's not true. You can hold the government accountable and ask for things, right? But how do you do it in a way that doesn't tear us apart? Because like I said, I think there's only two sides right now. The side that wants Ethiopia to go on, and the side that's funded, organized, and has a strategic plan in dividing and tearing Ethiopia apart and wanting to execute on a plan that's been poisoning and dividing the country for the last 30 years. And so I think, I hope people will realize that we have to be vocal. We have to, because I feel like a lot of the time, I think especially when you think about the majority of the people, I feel like sometimes they're still in the mode of, I feel like personally, when TPLF was on power, I was sort of disconnected. I see going on, but I don't want to involve with it because I don't think that I could actually make impactful change, if that makes sense, right? But now we have a different system where you can actually say things, right? And so I felt like we have to move out of that and say, like you said earlier, what can I do to make an impact? It may not be a big impact. It may have an impact on one person or just an impact of an hour, 2 hours on someone's life. But how do I make an impact? And because unless we start doing those things, I don't think we can free ourselves and truly become, a country that's strong to support one another and actually remove ourselves from poverty and be able to sustain our country. And so that's.
Yeah, and I think to add on to what you said, I love that, you may support the guy, you may not support the guy, but there's two sides, right? It's either Ethiopia is going to stay the way we are and we're going to work on our issues, or there's a group that's trying to tear us apart. And I think this all or nothing politics that we have going on with, I don't like Abiy, or I like Abiy and he's an angel, or I don't like Abiy and he's like the devil himself. Those two extremes are not going to help the country itself. I think we have to look beyond the leaders. We have to look beyond TPLF. We have to look beyond the prime minister. We have to look beyond prosperity and just really find what we want, so that maybe it may not be today, but in 10 years, we will be able to say and envision the Ethiopia that we want to see, the leaders that we want to see, as opposed to, fighting over those that have been, given to us. We'll be able to say, these are the kind of leaders we want, and this is the kind of things that we want for Ethiopia, not because somebody told us to, but because we fully have taken the responsibility of our country and been thinking about the things that we want to do, so that we're not trapped in this idea of, oh, this government is horrible, so I'm just going to wait for the next one to come, or I'm just going to fight this government to go away so that, the next one is hopefully better, right? That the only way we're going to break ourselves out of that is ourselves, not the government themselves. So I think I really like the idea of, you may like Abiy, you may not like the Prime Minister Abiy, or you may not like Prime Minister him, but Ethiopia needs to stay together, and there's work that we all could do regardless of who is in charge right now. I like that. Thank you. What is?
Sorry, if I may, I think, you know, I was the Prime Minister, you know, celebrating his 3rd year or whatever, right? And a lot of people, you know, I've seen a lot of good things. A lot of people, you know, other people not so good things. And so, but then you notice like a lot of the people who are saying those things are the people who were either clapping when he came into power without him doing anything, or the people who are just observers, you know. And I feel like those two things are especially community, oftentimes those are the two options, right? Either you clap to somebody because they say something good, something inspiring, or you're just an observer and you want to do that. Like, you know, and it's like, so what do you suppose I do, right? What's actionable, or how can you help speed that up, right? If I want to reform, can you share what steps the government should take, or what they should actually, like, actionable things, right? And I personally, like I said many times, I support him. I think you've done a fabulous thing, from rooting out 30 years of tyrannical ruling that have thousands of people and killed thousands of people, which is not easy. Whether you look at it from a democratic perspective or whatever, it's the fact that he was able to do that. I think he is amazing. I think he's done a great job just removing them from power. These are people who were, you know, had sniper pointing at him, who dominated the economy sector. I mean, every aspect of it. So if you really pause and think about that, to me, I think he has done a good job. Not to say there are not opportunities. I think there is billions of opportunities in Ethiopia that needs his attention, from, you know, little things that happen in the city, shortage of water, electricity, all the way to corruption and whatnot. And then you see the other things, that the projects that they have been doing, right? And I'm amazed by how much they're able to accomplish in the last 3 years compared to 30. And I'm like, I don't know if people are really looking at those things, the plans they have executed, the facilities they have up and running, and they've only been there for 3 years. You know, forget construction and development and all these things. Just the structuring a government takes a lot more work, because I'm sure they had to fire and let go a ton of people who just refuse to reform, right? And actually change their mindset where they're thinking. And so, and on top of that, they're still trying to figure out who are TPLF operator within the system that are coordinating attacks in different ethnic groups, who are helping, you know, do this and that, who are still doing corruption within the system. And so I think I also want to challenge the younger generation, because I've a lot of the younger generation speaking out against the prime minister. And to me, I'm like, do you have all the facts right? Have you really paused and examined what has been done? And so I really challenge them to really pause and look back and see what has been going on for the last 30 years and what this new, you know, group of people are trying to do. And not denying, you know, there is 1,000 more conflicts and 1,000 more issues that's happening, but what have they accomplished? And if we continue at this space, where could we go? I think I sound like an advocate for him, but I'm not.
I think that's we should get to that point where, you know, one is allowed to speak for a prime minister. It doesn't necessarily mean he's, you know, he's all that. For me, I think the way I think of it, but again, because, you know, we've been in the Western world for quite some time, is I don't care for President Biden. I really don't care for him. Like, he's not my cup of tea. But I'm willing to say, you know, if I see something that he's done, I appreciate, I'm willing to say so. And if I've seen something that I don't appreciate, I say, well, I knew that, right? It's just how democracy works. And I think there's some practice of democracy that we don't have in Ethiopia. But again, that doesn't mean that, like, I see also the points of people that don't support Prime Minister Abiy and why they don't support him for it. But again, that doesn't mean that they can't work with people in Ethiopia to support Ethiopians and to make sure Ethiopia and Ethiopians are, taken care of, and we are moving forward with the vision of a country that we have together.
And human lives are saved, and
yes,
speaking out the truth and whatnot. So yeah, it's
absolutely,
to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. So in that case, then, what is your vision for Ethiopia?
That is a tough question. Vision for Ethiopia. I think I don't remember the whole quote, but Martin Luther King said, I don't know if you remember that quote, I have a dream that my children won't be judged by the skin of their color, but the characteristics of their personality, right? And I think that really, that's what we need. As sad as it is, that happened in 1863, would you say? I'm not very good at history, but that's what's happening in Ethiopia. People are being killed based on their ethnicity. Farmers are being attacked because of their ethnicity. We're fighting because of different things. And these are all the poisons that TPLF put in place. Like I said, I believe that it was a tactic they implemented, and now we're ripping that. And so I hope for Ethiopia to start judging people based on their characteristics and their personality and who they are, rather than, oh, this is Amhara, this is I supposed to hate them, this is Oromo, I'm supposed to hate them, but actually really judge that person based on their characteristic and who they are, right? Not by they've been given by someone. And then I think our diversity makes us a beautiful country. We are lucky. We have such a rich history, starting from being a cradle of human, right, to coffee, and just so many good things that we have that others great countries don't have. We've existed for more than 3,000 years, unlike many developed country, and we have such a rich history. And so I hope we realize that and we celebrate our diversity without and choose love and be able to lead, to let love lead. So
absolutely. Thank you so much. That's such a beautiful vision. I love asking this question to my guests, because it really does help us and me even try to see like, oh, that's a different, like, beautiful vision of Ethiopia. So thank you for answering that. This is all I have for you. So would you tell us what you're going to be up to, where we can find you? If you have a social media, we can follow you. If you have events that are coming up, you want people to come to or attend, the floor is yours.
Awesome, thank you. So I have joined a team, EDGM. So it's we're hoping to kind of have young people join us to pretty much share the good side of Ethiopia and what can we do, really truly just advocate for Ethiopia. So please reach out to us. We're on Twitter, Facebook, a lot of social media. And then as far as currently, we have a protest that's planned here in Denver for April 8th, Thursday, April 8th at 10 a.m. Denver, Colorado. So I highly encourage you guys to join us and come out and support. The goal is to fight fake news that have been going on a lot, misrepresentation of Ethiopia. So we want to denounce that. We want to denounce TPLF. And truly unite the community. And so I encourage you guys to come out and join us. And then, yeah, that's all I have.
Do you guys have a specific location you're meeting out for the protest?
So we'll be downtown Denver, Colorado. I don't have the exact address, but I can go ahead and put it on my page. I have a Facebook page, so I'll put it on there as well as Twitter. Unity for Ethiopia also has the flyer on their website, so you can find the exact address on that bill with Denver, Colorado.
So it's probably in the Capitol Hill park they have. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much again for being here, taking the time out of your day to share this information with us. And please feel free anytime. This is your media. If you have any information you want to share with us, if you want to tell us what your organization, when you guys are organized and moving forward, I really appreciate you being here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having, and thank you so much for the listeners as well.
Absolutely. Thank you everyone for joining us. This has been such an amazing conversation. I hope you guys have learned, you all have learned as much as I have. Please go ahead and like and share this conversation. And until next week, we'll see you. Thank you.
አደባባይ ሚዲያ ለወገንተኝነት ጀርባውን የሰጠ ጊዜያዊ ጥቅምን አምቢኝ ብሎ የዘመመን ሊያቀና እውነትና እውቀትን አስከትሎ ኢኮኖሚያዊና መንፈሳዊ መረጃዎችን እንካችሁ ይላል። ትኩስ ዜናዎች፣ ዘጋቢ ፊልሞች፣ ጥልቅ ትንታኔዎች በአደባባይ ሚዲያ ይቀርባሉ። ራእያችን ጊዜውን ያማከለና ዘመኑን የዋጀ በእውነት የነጠሩ መረጃዎችን በእውቀት ደግፎ ለሀገራችን ብሎ ለዓለም ሕዝብ ማዳረስ ነው። አድሬሳችን አደባባይ ኢንፎ ሚዲያ @gmail.com፣ ዌብሳይታችን www.adebabay.com። ያግኙን፣ ይርዱን። የሁላችንም ስለሆነች ኢትዮጵያ በአደባባይ እንዘግባለን። አደባባይ ሚዲያ